Welcome to the Subjective Professor podcast, where we reject coercion and hypocrisy. This is episode 236, and we're going to talk about Elon Musk tweeting Milton Friedman or Xing Milton Friedman. I don't know what you're supposed to say, posting about Milton Friedman. I was going to do some topics from the Vance Rogan episode, but I needed to do more research just to bring some what do you call it, some meat to the discussion. But I had to do aftercare today after school, and I got back pretty late, and I am really beat. So I'm just pulling up an episode that I was thinking of doing earlier, but then I scrapped it for various reasons. So let's just go into Musk's Friedman tweets. I don't know if you follow him on X, but there was a time where he was posting Friedman links for a couple days anyway, at least. And I scrolled through his account, but for some reason I can only go back so far. I don't know how other people do it. But in any case, uh, the one particular Friedman tweet that I managed to find only because I had reposted it, excuse me, was about inflation, right? And how he basically said you have to keep an eye. The Friedman was saying that you have to keep an eye on government spending because that is the true tax, right? Because they have to somehow come up with all of that money that they are promising to spend on your behalf. And the greater that budget, the larger that budget becomes, the easier it is to find some space in there for corruption, for kickbacks, for all kinds of shadiness. And so that's what you have to keep an eye on. So I had to teach Milton Friedman starting from, I don't know, some time ago. I don't even remember when I first started teaching it, but I picked the book up purely by looking at the list on the suggested readings that we could choose from in order to teach. And it had free in the title, so I figured, why not? It can't be that bad. And I've said before that when you're doing graduate work at the university, you are never permitted to read anything pro-free market, not even a proper presentation of what the free market is. And so I managed to get my PhD. And I think if I read free market stuff before I got my PhD, I never would have gotten my PhD, right? No one would have agreed to work with me because that's how you get a PhD, right? You have to recruit professors to advise you, and you have to sell them on certain topics. And if the free market is out of favor, no professor is going to touch it, then you can't get a committee together so that you can get your PhD, right? So for whatever reason, I never picked up a book that properly explained the free market until after I started teaching, which turned out great. Uh, so I may have talked about and explained the free market, at least the way that I teach it, but I think it was over a year ago, almost 2 years ago. So I asked my wife once if anyone remembers the sermon that I preached a couple of years ago, and she was like, no. So perhaps a few people won't remind if I do a little bit of review. I already said that the pencil discussion in Milton Friedman's volume one, so the PBS version of the Free to Choose, he put it in video form. And since video is what a lot of students today find more accessible than just simply reading, I would make them watch the video. And if they were more interested, then they can read the entire book. And in volume one, part one of Free to Choose, he discusses the pencil. And at the time, I was struggling with race theory, like which race theory would be the best that doesn't give an unfair advantage over anybody else. And so we have all these other problems too, like greed and hate and all this other kind of stuff. So how do we move forward? What would be the best solution? And I was in a sort of limbo because, and I couldn't teach with confidence because I just found so many problems with all of the existing race theories. And then I stumbled on that, started reading, and it talked about the pencil. And then someone told me about the videos. And so I watched the videos. And what was so amazing about the pencil story was how race mattered so much less than costs or prices. In other words, prices eradicated the need to pay attention to someone's skin color, right? That's less important than how much you need to spend. So that's the first concept I wanted us to review to convince you that the free market is beautiful. It really is something wonderful to think about. And if you step back even just a little bit to see just so much beauty in something which is sort of very organic. So prices, Friedman will describe them as the messaging system of the free market. When I was really big on Friedman, and I think my man crush bromance that I had for Friedman was pretty obvious in class. And so I would have some students who were economics majors, and they would sort of introduce me to their economics professors. And so when I told them that I was really crazy over the moon for Friedman, they kind of were like, oh, really? Right? Because even economics professors don't like the free market. And I said, oh, so there's a problem with the free market? And he said, yes, there's a knowledge imbalance, right? Some people have more knowledge than the other, and they take advantage of other people in the market. And I thought about that, and I was like, wow, this guy is not so crazy about Friedman. That makes me sad. And so I thought about it a little bit. And I realized that that imbalance of information, that problem is overcome through price, right? So I don't really have to know and have all of this information in terms of what is better quality or what has better workmanship or not. What matters is the price, right? So something is going to be either too good to be true, like the price is too low. It's just got to be something wrong with it, right? Or the price is too expensive because it's a name brand, you can't afford it. Well, then you go for a lesser, cheaper version of what you want, right? So even when I was a kid, I knew that when I was a kid, Ralph Lauren polo shirts were all the rage, but they were extremely expensive. And so the only ones that I could get was a Kmart brand shirt that looked just like it. And it had kind of a horsey figure on the right on the pocket space of the shirt, but it wasn't Ralph Lauren. So it was a cheaper knockoff. But from a distance, I kind of looked like I fit in, that I had enough money to buy the clothes, the kind of clothes that other people were wearing at the time. So price is the messaging system for us, right? It gives us a lot of information. The more you understand that prices are giving us messages, then you start paying attention to what those messages actually are. And so even when you understand prices, you understand that there is no such a thing as price gouging. There's just supply and demand. So prices, I'm not an economics PhD, but I realize that through pricing, we can sort of render moot the econ professor's objection to my bromance with Milton Friedman. The next concept that comes up is this concept of exploitation. So he doesn't really go into it too much, but of course I do in class, like what makes a situation exploitative? And if you listen to a lot of race professors and people who hate on capitalism, the free market, basically anything they don't like is exploitation, right? But think about it. What makes exploitation possible? And that would be coercion. If you force someone to do something they would rather not, that's exploitation, right? So if someone is had hired you and they're paying you, right? Well, you agreed to pay work for that amount of money. Now, someone on the outside might say, oh, you're being exploited because you could certainly earn more money. And so if I do have a desire to make more money without having expending more effort, then I'm going to believe this guy. But that's only because you are adopting a different kind of subjectivity. You are taking as your own the perspective of someone else who doesn't like the transaction that you have made with your boss. They give you a job, they agree to pay you a certain amount, and you say yes. And so exploitation can only happen when there is force. Now, someone might say, well, what if people are exploiting their customers by forcing them to buy products that are overpriced, that whole price gouging thing. And you say, and because they have a monopoly. Well, monopolies stop at the border, right? So when you cross over to another country, they don't have the same dynamic there. And so it is very hard to pull off exploitation when you can buy or hire from another country. And this is why you have so many protectionist laws in any given country, right? Because they don't want you to be able to buy from someone else. That's what tariffs are, right? So you don't want to let your people buy products that are essentially the same from a different country, which doesn't have all of these regulatory protections. And so you punish people, right? You impose a tariff. So if a car is $5,000 in a different country, when it comes into the United States, they tax it, they put on a tariff of $20,000. And so now it's comparably priced with all the domestic brands, right? And so tariffs are a way of protecting exploitation, right? You are now forcing people to shop domestically rather than go shopping all over the world to find cheaper products. So exploitation, prices. I don't know how far we're going to go, but I'm just going to keep going until I hit the 20-minute mark. Okay. And then leave the rest of the concepts just from that first, volume of Free to Choose by Milton Friedman. Then he goes into this concept of competition for labor, right? He does go into it more in chapter 4 or 5, but competition for labor uh, people have to realize is the protection for workers, right? So a lot of people think that labor monopolies, unions, are the protection for labor, but no, that's not what it is. It's competition for that labor. Businesses fighting over each other to find the best workers. Monopolies just totally kill that dynamic, right? Where workers are not going to look for a better deal because they're tied to the job because of all of the perks, right? All the payouts at the end when you retire. Like you're 7 years in, you're 15 years in, you put too much time into that labor union to walk away. And so you're essentially staying, which then ruins this dynamic of people competing for the best workers, right? So uh, the protection for workers is competition. It's as long as there is competition, you cannot exploit workers, right? If you feel like you're underpaid, you look for someone else who's going to offer you more money. And so I always joke around that it's not job security that's all that desirable. It's job mobility, your ability to find a better job so you can quit the job that has been underpaying you, right? That doesn't appreciate the true value of what you bring to the table. And so when I talked about Caitlin Clark, the WNBA player, going to Europe would be an example of this competition for labor. You go to the person who recognizes what you bring to the table and you get compensated for that. The next concept, which I thought was very, very cool, just blew my mind, was the impersonal aspect of the free market. Now, in episode 29, I go into this. That was quite a while ago. But the impersonal free market, does not care about your gender, your age, your race. All it cares about is what you have to buy or sell and at what price, right? So when you go for a job, it's the labor that matters. You're selling your labor, not your skin color or your religion or your gender. And that's what's so messed up about today's world, the whole woke agenda, is that they want you to focus on characteristics which do nothing for the actual job, right? For the actual work that you're going to be hired to do, what your gender shouldn't matter, what your skin color shouldn't matter. All that should matter is can you do the job or not? And so the market is impersonal, doesn't care about those things. But if you make it an issue, then you will always lose to the country or business that is being impersonal, right? And I've given many examples in the past about this, but if you say, if I say I am only going to hire Asians, well, you're assuming that the best workers are all going to be Asian. Now, there's a trade-off, right? Some people will say that because of communication issues, because of cultural issues. Uh, and so maybe they don't make as much money. They don't care because the trade-off is to have workers that they can get along with. Okay. But if you go to the global market, the more that you are going to make choices based on characteristics which do not actually affect the final product, the more that you are going to fall back. You're not going to be able to keep up with the businesses that are targeting talent, right? That are targeting the skills that one needs and is required for the job to be done better, right? So we always have to ask ourselves, it's not, am I being discriminated against? Rather, you have to say, what skills do I have? Where can I go with these skills? Then he says, we don't have to talk about government. Government doesn't have to do anything. It's not if we don't have government, then we can't do this. If we didn't have government subsidizing green energy, then there wouldn't be any green energy. No, it doesn't work that way, right? All of these things would happen and they would happen more efficiently and they would happen better. What would be an example a simple example to illustrate this? And that would be language, right? The language that we speak, right, has not been created by a government, right? We don't have people who will say, we need a new language. You know what? It's going to be English. And so start making it. No, language is very organic, right? Even, the United States has a lot of, you know, complexity to it. And that's because it's a hodgepodge of many different languages. And so the pronunciation is not always consistent with the words. And yet, everyone, without any kind of direction or instruction from the government, we are all able to communicate with each other who speak the same language, right? And so it's voluntary cooperation of people speaking it all of the time that that language grows, that language breathes and changes and adapts as society changes, right? And let's see. So countries that trade with each other, right? The likelihood of war declines as long as you have people who are fixated on freedom. Obviously, we trade tremendously with China, and yet we are talking about war with China, and that's because of the financial threat, right? That's how important the financial aspect of our global economy is and how interlocking all of it is. But before if your country is trading heavily with another country, you'd be an idiot to try to go to war with that country, right? I've talked before how the United States was buying a lot of oil from Russia, and then when the war started in Ukraine, they said, okay, we won't buy the oil from Russia any longer. But they were still purchasing oil from Russia, except through India, right? So India became a middleman. They were selling all this oil whose origin is Russia, right? So countries that trade with each other, generally there is less likelihood of war normally. And so there's an expression that says, when goods don't cross borders, armies will, right? So you want to trade ever more and more, which means you are not an isolationist, okay? And those are some of the concepts from Friedman that, excuse me, I have time to go over. Now I'm just going to wrap it up to keep it to 20 minutes or just over. So the beauty of the free market, it comes from the spontaneous order, without any planning, but it seems like it was planned because it works so well. And Friedman or Adam Smith talked about a concept, which I won't even mention here because it always messes people up. He says it's as if someone had planned it. And so people say, oh, you mean someone has planned it? And so now you have government, right? But government is basically these days are made up of people who hide their actual agenda, right? So they'll lie through their teeth to get elected. But once they obtain office and they have all of this power they can use to corrupt the system and reward all of the people who help them get elected, people reveal through policy what their objective, what their agenda really was. Now, in order to get elected, they're going to skew all of the information, right? Misinformation, aka. Now, the thing is, the politicians will do that. We will eventually figure it out through the prices, what they have done. But by that time, most people can't associate the results of certain policy with the actual policy because there's a time lag. And by that time, people are always coming up with more explanations as to why these bad things are happening in our society. And so then the truth gets buried even deeper. Now, we have to remember that the free market is so awesome because we vote with our dollars. How we spend our money, how we save our money, is the way that we express our desires. We don't need the government to do anything. All of us acting on our subjectivity will make choices, which creates a new situation. And after viewing that new situation, people are going to make changes in their decisions. They're going to tweak their decisions their choices as they go along. So hopefully through this election, people will remember this, the beauty of the free market, how through voluntary cooperation, people seeking to try to satisfy other people's desires, people trying to economize and make things more efficient, therefore bringing prices down and improving the quality of life and allowing people to have more disposable income to be able to enjoy a little bit of relaxation as opposed to being stressed all of the time. Um, Hopefully, after this election, people will begin to remember the roots of this country, all of the freedom that made this country so great, and then make an effort to return to that beauty. I'm hoping that Elon Musk is tweeting certain things, but he's also listening to Friedman a lot more and understanding the logic and how just well ordered everything is in a free market structure, and eventually maybe even get to full-blown anarcho-capitalism. But in the meantime, for him to realize that government is the problem. And with all of this potential influence that Trump would give to Musk, I'm hoping that he just absolutely rips apart government, fires 80% of all government workers, and then maybe start moving us in a more positive direction instead of the direction of war and chaos. That's it for this episode. I might have rambled a little bit because I am really tired, but hopefully you were able to enjoy this episode, and I will talk to you next time.